Good afternoon. My name is Alan Gormley. I work with GS1 Ireland as the Standards, Conformance and Training Manager there. So essentially what that means is I help companies implement GS1 standards correctly. I also sit in a number of standards maintenance groups, so developing standards for things like traceability and event sharing. So what I'm going to talk about today, I've heard so much of GS1 already, I don't think there's a need for me to talk, but anyway, I'll persevere. I'm going to give you an overview of GS1 standards and the three pillars, the identify, capture and share components of our system of standards. I'm going to talk a bit about barcode conformance, but in a specific context, and that's that of unique device identification. It's a hot topic at the moment, and I think Axicon and others this morning have covered a lot of what I could speak to anyway. Finally, I'll talk a little bit about GS1 solutions and what we can offer if time permits. So, well, first of all, I'd just like to thank Vision ID for inviting us here. I think the diversity of companies that are here today are indicative of the collaborative approach that they take to their work. And I'm pleased to say that Vision ID are currently going through our solution provider program by implementing a standards-based solution using RFID and an EPC technology. So for that as well. And well, I should say that if any other companies are interested in doing the same, we're around all day, so please talk to us. Okay, so GS1, an unknown known, who are we? We were formerly the Article Numbering Association International. We then became EAN, the European Article Numbering Association. In 2005, we joined with the Uniform Code Council in the USA and became GS1. We say we're a numbering organization. Sometimes I think we're more into letters than numbers, but nevertheless, how you know us, I suppose, really is because of the humble barcode. Every barcode that you see on a product in the supermarket is probably going to be a GS1 barcode, is in fact going to be a GS1 barcode. We're user driven, so we're a membership based organization. We're neutral, and we're a not-for-profit organization. I'm not going to dwell on the figures and the numbers, only to say that, well, we are the most widely used system of standards in the world, for supply chain, that is. Essentially, I mean, what it is we do, I mean, I heard Daniel this morning talking about visibility networks and things like that, and that's what GS1 standards are all about. They give the ability to companies and solution providers to identify, capture, and share information. Ultimately, I suppose what it is that we enable is that people can use the data rather than search for the data. So, well, first of all, the identify section of our standards. GS1 is a suite of identification numbers, and these numbers are used to uniquely identify everything from companies, products, locations, logistic units, even document type identifiers. So there's a suite of these numbers that are used by companies to enhance their business processes or indeed for solutions like traceability. The second pillar, which we call capture, is really about the barcodes that we set standards around. And I heard from Axicon that whilst there are ISO standards for these barcodes, GS1 has, I suppose, more guidelines around the actual implementation of them and the application of them. So the EAN, the first barcode you see there, is probably the one you're most familiar with, but we also have barcodes or standards around barcodes like the data matrix, which is used primarily in healthcare, the ITF-14, which is used for printing on corrugated material, and we also have standards around RFID tags, so both high frequency and ultra high frequency tags GS1 has standards around. The third pillar, the share pillar, is really about data exchange and different types of data exchange. So the first being master data, so information about products. So depending on the industry that you're in, you might be familiar with the FIO or 1169 Food Information Regulation. So there's an increased demand for nutritional information, allergen information and things like that. GS1 is a network of databases, or data pools as we call them, that can host this information, and it can be exchanged globally or indeed nationally between different trading partners. The second component of the share pillar, I suppose, is our e-commerce. So every business message that you can imagine, whether it's a purchase order or an invoice, has an equivalent in either XML or EANCOM as we call it. And what it allows for is machine-to-machine communication. The third pillar is really about sharing event data. What do I mean by event data? Well, things like the what, the who, the when, the where, and the how of a product as it moves through the supply chain. And we have standards governing this as well, and I'll talk a little bit more about them in context later. So that's GS1 in a nutshell, really. I'm told anything that's small enough to stay in a nutshell should probably stay there. So I'm going to expand a little bit on the application of the standards. And I mean, initially I was going to talk about how to create a barcode correctly. This isn't a good example. And I mean, there's lots of standards governing this, whether it's X dimensions, application standards, heights, etc. And we heard a little bit about those already. But I think these have been covered this morning, well, quite comprehensively. So what I'm actually going to talk about is one specific component of creating a conformant barcode. And I'll focus on the regulatory part, because ultimately what you need to create a barcode is software, the GS1 specifications, a printer, regulatory documents, and other implementation guidelines, so to speak. But I'll focus today primarily on the FDA's UDI regulation. It was published about 3 weeks ago, so it is a hot topic at the moment. But I suppose the solutions around what I'm going to speak to can be applied to food, it can be applied to aerospace, it can be applied to defence. So just bear that in mind as I'm taking you through it. Okay, so what is unique identification? Well, the FDA say it's a standardized system to develop unique identification numbers. It has to be in human readable and a barcode form or an RFID tag. And it has to be, or data about that medical device I'm talking about, has to be submitted to the FDA's UDI database. So for the solution providers there, I'd stress that users, and I think some of them are here today, do need your help and support in adhering to this regulation. And again, I'm not talking just about healthcare or medical devices here. There's lots of new regulations in terms of beef and poultry traceability. So everything I'm going to talk about is also relevant to them. I'm a visual person, so to understand what the actual FDA are requiring, the first pillar there you see is about the actual number itself. So what they require is a static identifier, so something that identifies a hip joint, and they need a second part to that identifier, which is the dynamic data, so production information, batch, serial number, expiry, or a combination of all three. The second pillar is the database, which users are going to be required to enter information up onto. And the third is the data carrier, so whether it's a barcode or an RFID tag, etc. I mean, the purpose it's to enable a common worldwide system for product identification, and it should eliminate differences between jurisdictions and offer significant benefits to manufacturers. That's from the FDA's purpose. From manufacturers' point of view, there are other things that can be gained from this as well. Really what's driving it, and I'm not going to go through this because I have a good few slides to get through, but patient safety is a big driver, as well as the effects on the supply chain, because, well, at the moment there are, and this is a real example provided by Medtronic, current systems of product catalogue numbers can be duplicated or are duplicated by companies and trading partners. So if you look at the number there, 305905, each of those companies are using the same number to identify different things. The significance of that, I suppose, is that as it moves through the supply chain, product recalls and traceability become impossible, potentially, but certainly more difficult. Another reason is, well, multiple barcodes on healthcare products. So which one do you scan at the point of care? And this is a real problem when you're talking about the right patient, the right dose, the right time, etc. How can GS1 help? Well, this is our business, I suppose, identification, data capture and sharing. The FDA actually explicitly mention us in the regulation, so we do have the standards to help ensure compliance. Ultimately, how it's done this is an old presentation, ultimately how it's done, and excuse me for skipping through these, but I think I have it covered in other slides, is that the traditional GTIN number is translated into the production identifier as required by the FDA. And then you have all that production information that you need to encode into the barcode as well. With what we call our more intelligent barcodes, the GS1 data matrix, the GS1128, and indeed RFID tags, these are combined and encoded into one code to satisfy the FDA's requirements. So that's the first part, or the two parts, the device identifier and the capture components. The second part is, of course, the database, and I think there's about 63 attributes that are required to be uploaded at the moment. That might be reduced. It might be extend. The rule has just been published, so we're not entirely sure of how that's going to go yet. And the Americans were off work for a few weeks as well, so there's been a delay in information coming from the FDA. But nevertheless, how that can be met, or that need can be met by GS1, and I can share these slides with you later. These are just details about what's needed to be loaded, and I don't think we have time to look at it today, but I'm happy to talk to you about it afterwards if you require. But GS1, GS1 Ireland in particular, we host a database here in Ireland that's connected to a network of databases globally. And ultimately what users do is they load information up into that standardized product information. It's registered in a global registry, which is essentially a yellow pages for products. And from there, retailers, hospitals, whoever needs the information can pull that information down. So again, if you want to talk to me about that, I'm here all day. That's just a graphical representation, as is this, but this is probably a good slide to indicate what it is I'm talking about. So different manufacturers load their product information, validated information, whether it be logistic measurements, whether it be nutrients, whether it be the requirements of the FDA. It's held in what we call the Global Data Synchronisation Network, and it can be published to whoever needs it, whether it's a European medical device database, whether it's a retailer, or whether it's a hospital. So that's, I suppose, the second way in which GS1 can assist companies in complying to the EU regulation. Again, this is just information that's needed for the databases. There is some resources on our global website, and I encourage you to have a look at that. The final thing I will mention is that last pillar that I spoke to at the beginning, which is the electronic product code information service, which is essentially another structure that is used to share event data about a product. So really what I'm talking about is traceability here. EPC Global was developed, I suppose, with MIT in the early 2000s. The term, the Internet of Things, really was coined then. But it defines the data formats, the capture and query interfaces that are needed to create a visibility network that we heard Daniel talking about earlier today. And that could be in the beef industry, it could be in the poultry industry, it can be in pharmaceuticals, whatever. It's an open standard. I should actually add that it doesn't require RFID technology. The EPC framework is designed to work with barcodes as well. And yeah, essentially what it creates is a visibility network that can be used for tracking, tracing, for pedigree. If you're talking about pedigree or e-pedigree in California, this is the framework that can be used to provide that pedigree information. Inventory management, returnables, product recalls as well. It's a key enabler. Really what we're talking about is capturing the what of an object, whether it's a GTIN, which is a product, a serial shipping container code, an asset identifier, whatever it is that you want to track. The where, so where has that product been? The when was it scanned, or when was it read if it's an EPC tag? And then of course why. What was the business step? Was it an aggregation of boxes onto a pallet? What was the actual business step? So, I mean, that's a typical, well, it's a very simplified example of where it can be used. So, boxes come in from production. They come in for packing. There's 5 boxes in total packed. It's commissioned for dispatch. And it is, the transaction then is that a dispatch advice has been sent to the trading partner, and this is all recorded within this global database. And you can choose where to share this information and with who you share the information, whether it be regulatory or trading partners, etc. So just some misconceptions about EPCIS, the Electronic Product Code Information Service. It's not an application, it's a set of standards. It's the solution providers here today. I think I saw ASD earlier. It's these people who are implementing these standards for use. But it does define the interfaces, as I've said, that these people implement or you implement as companies. It can be integrated into ERP systems for tracking and tracing applications. It doesn't replace traditional EDI, it supplements it, and it does not require RFID, which is a common misconception. It can be used with GS1 barcodes. Conclusions. Well, as I said at the beginning, I didn't want to talk too much about X dimensions and barcode heights and application standards, but I do want to make the point that I think when we talk about conformance in barcoding now, we're not just talking about the barcode itself, we're talking about the data associated with it. And whether that be event data or master data that's needed for the food information regulation, for fish traceability, for whatever it might be, GS1 has solutions for that. So I urge you, if you do want to talk to us during the day, please do. We have a stand just outside. Okay, thank you for your time.